The memory of Eli is a ghost limb. It doesn't hurt in a sharp, specific way anymore. It's a constant, low-grade phantom ache, a presence defined by its profound absence. It's the empty chair on the porch I now sit on alone, the silence where his laugh used to be. My daughter asked about him the other day, her small face scrunched in confusion. "Uncle Eli? Does he not like us anymore?" How do you explain to a child that you are the monster in the story? That you took a sacred thing and smashed it on the floor just to hear the sound it made? I am 38 years old, and the most defining act of my life was a single venomous sentence spoken 2 years ago. I have replayed it 10,000 times. I have dissected it in the sterile beige-colored room of my therapist, Dr. Shaw. I have screamed it into my pillow at 3 a.m. I have whispered it to the bottom of a whiskey glass. It never changes. It just sits there, a fossil of my own cruelty, preserved in the amber of that moment. We built our friendship like a fortress, brick by brick, starting in the chaotic wasteland of middle school. I was the quiet one, the observer. My world was internal, a landscape of careful thoughts and quieter anxieties. Eli was my opposite. He didn't just enter a room, he conducted it. His confidence wasn't arrogant, it was a gravitational pull. People orbited him naturally, drawn to his easy laugh and the way his attention made you feel like the most interesting person in the world. We bonded over the pixelated battlefields of Legend of Karthus and the screeching guitars of bands no one else had heard of. We spent countless afternoons in his basement, the air thick with the smell of stale pizza and adolescent ambition, our laughter echoing off the wood-paneled walls. He was the one who talked me into asking Lisa Miller to the 8th grade dance, who covered for me when I borrowed my dad's car without asking, who sat with me in stunned, silent solidarity when my grandfather died. He taught me how to throw a spiral, how to talk to a girl without tripping over my own tongue, how to be a little less of an island. I was the keeper of his quieter confidences. When his parents fought, he'd show up at my window, and we'd just walk, not saying much, the shared silence saying everything. When he didn't get the starting position on the high school baseball team, it was me he cursed and raged to, not the cheering squad that usually surrounded him. I was the archive for his vulnerabilities, and he trusted me with them implicitly. It was a sacred duty. I was the quiet one, the listener. It was my role, my purpose in our dynamic. Adulthood didn't change the architecture of us. We navigated the strange currents of our 20s together. Failed relationships, dead-end jobs, the terrifying thrill of real responsibility. He was my best man. I can still see him grinning at me at the altar, giving me a barely perceptible thumbs up as my soon-to-be wife Clara walked down the aisle. When our daughter, Maya, was born, he was the first person I called after the grandparents. He showed up at the hospital smelling of the outside world, his eyes wide with a strange, reverent joy, and he held her with a tenderness I'd never seen in him before. He was her godfather. We'd sit on this very porch, watching Maya play in the yard and spin elaborate fantasies of our shared grumpy old age. "We'll be those two old codgers," he'd say, sipping his beer, yelling at kids to get off our lawn, arguing about whose turn it is to get the denture adhesive from the store. "I'd still be losing every argument," I'd retort, and he'd laugh, a full-bodied, genuine sound that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. That porch wasn't wood and paint. It was a promise, a future, a shared destination. I believed in it as surely as I believed in the sun rising in the east.
Then Hannah arrived. She was a curator at a modern art museum, all sharp angles and intelligent eyes that seemed to dissect everything they landed on. At first, I approved. She was good for him, I thought. She challenged him. Where he was impulsive, she was deliberate. Where he could be glib, she demanded substance. She encouraged him to take a course in graphic design, something he'd always talked about but never pursued. She suggested he cut back on the late-night drinking sessions with the guys, framing it as listening to his body. I saw a new focus in him, a maturity that I, in my smug satisfaction, attributed to her positive influence. But the landscape of our friendship began to shift in subtle, then not so subtle ways. Our weekly video game nights were the first to go. Hannah and I are trying this new meditation thing, he'd say, or we've got tickets to a gallery opening. The excuses were always reasonable, always couched in the language of self-improvement. Then came the canceled weekend hiking trips, the missed calls that went unreturned for days, the text messages that were answered with a terse, "Sorry, swamped, talk later." The silence, where his presence used to be, began to grow, a patch of emotional frostbite. I felt a petty, ugly jealousy take root. It wasn't just about Hannah. It was about the version of Eli she was creating, a version that seemed to have less and less room for me. The quiet listener was no longer needed. He had a new, more demanding audience. When we finally managed to coordinate a drink, a month of scheduling later, the distance was a tangible thing in the booth between us. He looked the same, but the energy was different. The effortless magnetism was strained, replaced by a faint, humming tension. He nursed a single beer while I finished my second. "You good, man?" I asked, the question laden with all the unspoken weeks of absence.
He stared at a watermark on the wooden table, tracing it with his finger. "Yeah, no, I don't know." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Clara and Maya good?" "They're great. Stop deflecting." He looked up then, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the marble facade of my best friend. A flicker of genuine, unvarnished fear. I'm seeing someone, Leo. A therapist." The confession landed not with a bang, but with a dull, shocking thud. "A therapist? Why? What's wrong?" "Turns out a lot," he said, his voice low. This constant hum, this background noise of dread I've had for years. I always thought it was just how life felt, that everyone was just pretending they weren't terrified all the time. He looked at me, searching for understanding. "Hannah," she noticed. She said it wasn't normal to feel like you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I went, and he said it sounds like generalized anxiety, a real, clinical thing. I was stunned. Eli? Anxious? He was the rock, the steady hand, the one who laughed in the face of pressure. "But you're the most confident person I know." "It's a performance, man. A really, really good one. I'm like a duck, calm on the surface, paddling like hell underneath." He took a long swallow of his beer. "He's got me on these pills. SSRIs. Just started a few weeks ago. Trying to, you know, fix the wiring.
He said the word fix with a derisive sneer, as if he were talking about a faulty appliance, not the core of his own being. Holy shit, Eli. I breathed, my mind reeling. All those years, the silent walks, the occasional unexplained dark moods I'd attributed to hangovers or stress. It had a name. It had a shape. He leaned forward, his eyes intense, pleading. Look, no one knows. Not my folks, not the guys at work. Especially not the guys at work. You know how it is in that office. They smell weakness, it's over. Promise me, Leo. Promise me you won't tell a soul. Not even Clara. I felt a surge of something warm and powerful. This was the old currency. A secret. My domain. He was reinstating me as the keeper of his truths. The jealousy I'd felt towards Hannah melted away in the face of this profound trust. Of course, I said, my voice thick with a solemn gravity. Of course, I promise. Your secret is safe with me. He relaxed, the tension draining from his shoulders. Thanks, man. I knew I could tell you. For a brief, beautiful moment, the fortress felt strong again. I had my friend back. I had no idea. I was merely being given the key to the arsenal I would later use to destroy its gates. The months that followed were a strange, liminal period. For a few weeks, things felt almost normal. He'd check in more. We'd text about stupid things. But the equilibrium was fragile. Hannah's influence was a constant low-frequency pull. Our plans were still scarce, and when we did manage them, they were often cut short by a text from her or a prior commitment I hadn't been made aware of. The secret he'd entrusted me with became a wall, not a bridge. I couldn't ask him how he was really doing without referencing the therapy, and he seemed reluctant to bring it up, as if naming it gave it too much power. The joint project was my idea, a foolish, nostalgic attempt to recapture what we were losing. A friend of a friend was opening a craft brewery and needed a complete branding package. Logo, labels, website. Eli, with his newfound design skills, could handle the visuals. I, the steady, organized one, would manage the client relations, the budget, the project timeline. We'd split the profits 50-50. It was supposed to be fun. A return to the basement days, but with a paycheck. It started well enough. The initial creative energy was infectious. We'd meet in my garage-turned-office, whiteboards covered in sketches and mood boards. For a few glorious hours, it was just like old times. But the cracks began to show quickly. Eli's creative process was chaotic, fueled by bursts of inspiration, followed by periods of radio silence. My process was linear, methodical. I needed check-ins and progress reports. He found them suffocating. It's art, Leo, not a spreadsheet, he'd snap, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. It's a business, Eli. The client doesn't care about your artistic flow. They care about deadlines. The tension was a third partner in the garage, sipping our coffee and breathing down our necks. Hannah's voice was a constant specter in his reasoning. Hannah thinks the color palette should be more muted, he'd say. Or, I was talking to Hannah, and she said we should be valuing our time more, that the initial quote was too low. Every mention of her name was a tiny, fresh puncture in my patience. She wasn't even here, and she was managing him, managing us.
The final blow-up was inevitable. The client had emailed me, concerned. The final logo concepts were a week overdue, and the website mock-ups hadn't been delivered. The budget, which I had meticulously managed, was being strained by the extended timeline. I called Eli, my tone clipped and professional, the voice I used for unreliable contractors. We're behind, Eli. The client is getting anxious. Where are the mock-ups? His sigh was a gust of static in my ear. They're not right yet. I'm not happy with them. I need more time. We don't have more time. This was the drop-dead date.
You agreed to it." "That was before I realized how nitpicky this guy was going to be," he shot back, his voice rising. "You just roll over and give him whatever he asks for. You're not pushing back at all. You're not pulling your weight on the creative defense." The accusation was so ludicrous, so perfectly calibrated to infuriate me, that I actually laughed. I'm not pulling my weight. I'm the one managing his anxiety, reworking the schedule, justifying your delays. You're off in your creative bubble, completely oblivious to the fact that this is a real job with real consequences. Oh, here we go, Mr. Spreadsheet, the grown-up in the room. Maybe if you had a little vision, instead of just ticking boxes, we'd have a better product. We were shouting now, the carefully constructed facades of our adulthood crumbling, revealing the raw, petty teenagers underneath. It was about the project, but it wasn't about the project at all. It was about every canceled plan, every unreturned text, every piece of him that Hannah had claimed. It was about the terrifying feeling that the fortress we had built was being dismantled, brick by brick, and I was being left outside in the cold.
The words flew, sharp and ugly. He accused me of being controlling, of trying to micromanage his genius. I accused him of being unprofessional, of living in a fantasy land constructed by Hannah. The air in the garage was thick with the poison of our resentment. And then I saw it. The final card in my hand. The ultimate trump card. He was yelling, his face flushed, gesticulating wildly about artistic integrity, about not being a corporate drone. And all I could see was the ghost of that night in the bar. The fear in his eyes, the whispered confession. I didn't even think. The words were a weapon I had been given for safekeeping, and in my rage, I turned it on him. I let the silence hang for a beat after his last sentence, letting my anger cool into something far more dangerous, pure, unadulterated contempt. My voice dropped, becoming quiet, precise, and lethally calm. I looked him straight in the eye. Maybe if you didn't need pills to get through the week, you'd think straight. The effect was not instantaneous. It was geological. The anger drained from his face, leaving behind a blank, terrifying canvas. The flush of rage receded, replaced by a waxy, pale stillness. His eyes, which had been blazing with indignation, just emptied. They weren't hurt, weren't angry. They were simply unrecognizing. He was looking at a stranger who wore his best friend's face. He didn't say a word. He didn't slam the door. He just turned, with a slow, deliberate finality, and walked out of the garage. I heard the soft click of the side gate, and then the sound of his car engine starting, a low hum that faded down the street until it was swallowed by the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood. The silence he left behind was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A part of me, the petty, wounded animal, felt a savage thrill. I won. I had found the one thing that could shut down his tirade, the one vulnerability his new Hannah-fied confidence couldn't armor against. I had won the argument. The triumph lasted for all of 30 seconds. Then the cold began to seep in. I told myself I'd give him a day. Let him cool off. Let me cool off. I'd call him. I'd apologize. It was a bad fight. We'd had them before. We'd get past it. He'd understand. I said it in anger. I didn't mean it. But as the hours bled into a day, then two, the weight of what I had done began to crystallize. This wasn't a normal fight. This was a fundamental violation. I hadn't just insulted him. I had taken the most vulnerable part of his soul, the part he had entrusted to me for safekeeping, and I had used it as a cudgel. I had weaponized his trust. I drafted a dozen texts. "I'm so sorry. I was an asshole. I didn't mean it." I deleted every one. The words were ash in my mouth, because they were a lie. In that moment, I meant it. Not the literal sentiment. I didn't for a second believe his medication clouded his judgment. I meant the cruelty. I meant the desire to inflict a wound as deep as the one I was feeling. I meant to win. A week passed. The silence was a physical presence in my house. Clara asked what was wrong. I gave her a sanitized version, a stupid fight about the brewery project. She knew it was more, but she let it lie. I was a storm cloud, irritable and distant. I couldn't focus at work. I'd pick up my phone to call him a dozen times a day, my thumb hovering over his name, but a cold dread would paralyze me. What would I even say?
The weeks turned into a month. The brewery project stalled and died. The mutual friend who had connected us called me, his voice laced with awkward confusion. "Hey, man, Eli said to just shelve it. Everything cool with you guys?" "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "Just creative differences, you know how it is." The silence stretched, becoming a new, terrible normal. I started noticing his absence in the ecosystem of my life. His birthday came and went. No call, no text. My birthday was a quiet, hollow affair. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, a part of me still believing he would break, that our history was too strong for one sentence to erase. He didn't. Mutual friends stopped mentioning him when I was around. At first it was subtle, omitting his name from stories, carefully editing anecdotes. Then it became a conscious avoidance. I'd walk into a room and a conversation would falter. I saw the pity in their eyes, and worse, the judgment. They knew. They might not have known the specific words, but they knew I was the one who had broken us. Eli was the wounded party. I was the perpetrator. 6 months after the fight, I ran into Mike, a college friend we had in common, at the grocery store. The obligatory small talk was agony. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. How's Eli?" I asked, the name feeling foreign and dangerous on my tongue. Mike looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "He's good. Really good, actually. He moved. Got a job with a big design firm in Crestwood. A fresh start, you know?" Crestwood was 2 hours away. Might as well have been on the moon. "Oh," I said, the word a small, deflated thing. "That's great. Tell him I said hi." Mike's gaze dropped to the floor. "Yeah, sure, man. I will." He never would. The message was clear. I was a part of the past he was leaving behind. The finality of it was a door slamming shut in a distant room of my life. I went home and, in a fit of pathetic desperation, looked him up on social media. His profiles were gone, deleted, every last one. It was the most Eli thing he could have done. A complete and total severance. He hadn't just left town. He had erased the digital footprints that led back to me. The porch felt emptier than ever. The fantasy of our grumpy old age curdled into a taunt. I'd sit there, watching Maya play, and feel the ghost of his laugh in the wind, a haunting reminder of what I had sacrificed for the petty satisfaction of winning a meaningless argument. The truth, the one that I had to finally admit in the crushing weight of that silence, was the core of my damnation. I had meant to hurt him. The victory wasn't worth it. It was the most costly victory of my life. I had won the argument, and in doing so, I had murdered the friendship. I was living in the hollow aftermath. A king of ruins. The descent was gradual, a slow leak of light from my world. I became a poorer version of myself, shorter with Clara, distracted with Maya. I'd find myself staring into the middle distance, the scene in the garage playing on a relentless loop. The look on his face, the silence, the click of the gate. I started having trouble sleeping. A low-grade anxiety, the very kind Eli had described, became my constant companion. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., my mind a theater of regrets, with that moment as the main feature. I understood, viscerally now, what he meant about the constant hum of dread. I was living inside the consequences of his, and I had no one to talk to about it. The one person who would have understood was the one I had exiled. Clara finally sat me down one night after I had snapped at Maya for spilling her juice. "This has to stop," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You're not here. You're a ghost in this house. It's been 6 months. You need to talk to someone, a professional." The word professional sent a jolt through me. Therapist, pills, fix himself. The echo of my own weaponized words. I resisted. I wasn't the one who needed fixing. I was just guilty, grieving. But the truth was, I was drowning in the quiet, and I needed a lifeline. Dr. Shaw's office was exactly as I had imagined a therapist's office would be. Beige, quiet, with inoffensive abstract art on the walls, and a box of tissues placed strategically on the small table between our chairs. He was a man in his 50s, with a calm, unhurried demeanor that I immediately found both irritating and reassuring. I didn't know where to start. I talked about work stress. I talked about the challenges of parenting. I talked about everything, except the gaping, Eli-shaped hole in the center of my life. During our 3rd session, he gently steered me there. "You mentioned a falling out with a close friend last time. It seems to carry a significant weight for you." And it all came tumbling out. The whole story. The friendship, the basement, the porch, Hannah, the secret in the bar, the argument in the garage, the sentence, the silence. I cried for the first time since Maya was born, ugly, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I told him I didn't mean it. Dr. Shaw waited for my breathing to even out. He leaned forward slightly. "Let's sit with that for a moment. You didn't mean it. What if you did?" The question was like a splash of cold water. "What?" He said, "You said the words with intent. You chose them for their maximum impact. You aimed for a vulnerability you were uniquely aware of. So, perhaps in that moment,
You did mean to cause pain, to win. Acknowledging that doesn't make you a monster, Leo. It makes you a human being who acted out of profound hurt and made a catastrophic error in judgment. The guilt you feel is the proof that it's not who you are, but it is what you did. It was the first moment of clarity I'd had in months. He was right. My endless loop of "I didn't mean it" was a coward's mantra, a way of distancing myself from my own actions. The real, more terrifying truth was that I had meant it, and I had to own that.
Therapy became my own confessional. I talked about my jealousy, my feelings of inadequacy next to Eli's vibrant confidence, my fear of being left behind. I saw, with horrifying clarity, that I had placed the entire burden of my social identity on our friendship. When he began building a life that included me less, I hadn't known how to be myself without him. The argument was the violent eruption of that accumulated, unacknowledged terror. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., I sat in that beige room and tried to talk about guilt. And every time, my mind would conjure Eli. I wondered if he was still in therapy. I wondered if the pills were helping. I wondered if he ever thought of me. And if he did, was it with hatred or with a sad, distant pity? The punishment was not some grand karmic disaster. It wasn't losing my job or my family. The punishment was the silence. It was the knowledge. It was the permanent subtraction of a fundamental color from the palette of my life. It was having to sit week after week in a therapist's office, doing the very work I had once, in my moment of supreme cruelty, mocked him for needing. The irony was a tart, metallic taste in my mouth, a taste I deserved to swallow forever. A year after the fight, Mike texted me. It was a simple, brutal message. Heard from Sarah. Eli got married last weekend, small ceremony in Crestwood. Hannah, of course. I stared at the words until they blurred on the screen. He had started fresh, a new city, a new job, a new life as a married man, a life where I did not exist. I wasn't even a guest at the wedding of my best friend, the man who was supposed to be the best man at mine, the godfather to my child. The finality of it was absolute. The door was not just shut, it had been bricked over.
I didn't cry. I just felt a deep, seismic settling. This was it. This was the consequence. This was the karma. Not a fiery crash, but a slow, quiet freeze. I still sit on the porch. The memory of Eli is no longer a sharp stab. It's a chronic condition, a part of my emotional bone structure. I am a different man because of what I did. A little more careful with my words, a little more aware of the terrible power of trust, a little more humble. I won the argument. I have the silence to prove it. And sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I look at the empty chair beside me and understand, with a clarity that is both painful and peaceful, that the silence between us is the exact shape and weight of the punishment I earned. It is a life sentence, and I serve it every day. What is the one line you've spoken that you wish more than anything you could take back? How does its echo shape who you are today?